A week has passed since the ceasefire in Gaza was declared, but Israeli strikes and incursions continue along Gaza's edges, blurring the line between war and its supposed aftermath.
Gaza still uninhabitable place. People are going back, but they are finding once and again no homes, no residential areas. This is ugly. This is bad. This is man-made disaster. We have ceasefire, very fragile ceasefire, no horizon whatsoever for talking about self-determination, independence, Palestinian state. No mentioning whatsoever to have an end for this criminal belligerent occupation. Where is India? The mighty India, the India of pride, of history. It has its share to contribute to right causes and to justice. This is the first genocide war happens, and because of our heroic work of our journalists, their nobility, their commitment, their professionalism of exposing reality to the world, they paid, and they paid heavily. We know we are not alone. All free committed people across the globe do support that, and states sooner, better than later, this will be implemented, inshallah.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Gaza Stories. My guest today is Raji Sourani, a Palestinian human rights lawyer. He's also the director of the Palestinian Centre for Human Rights and one of Gaza's most enduring voices for accountability and the rule of law. A week has passed since the ceasefire in Gaza was declared, but Israeli strikes and incursions continue along Gaza's edges, blurring the line between war and its supposed aftermath. However, the deeper question remains about sovereignty, justice, and what it means to rebuild a society under siege. In the last 2 years, Gaza has seen one of the most devastating chapters in its modern history. Tens of thousands have been killed, entire neighborhoods erased, and a generation displaced. International courts have spoken, resolutions have been passed. Even a UN inquiry of commission has declared that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. But for many Palestinians, the rule of law still feels distant, suspended between principle and power. Today, we try to understand what this ceasefire really means, not just as a pause in fighting, but as a legal and moral test for the international community. Mr. Surani, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Muneef, so much
Yeah.
for
So,
having me.
my first question, and it comes to the reality of the ceasefire. There are multiple reports from global news outlets, including Al Jazeera, which reveal that continued Israeli military operations are there near Gaza buffer zones, causing casualties even after the truce took effect. From an international law standpoint, is Donald Trump's quote unquote 20-point peace plan enforceable in reality?
As they said, they began with item one. And item one, it's talking about return of the hostages and the bodies of them for those who lost their life. And in exchange, releasing Palestinian prisoners and dead bodies. That inclusive with ceasefire, immediate ceasefire. The exchange had happened. The Israeli hostages, 20 of them were released live. They are healthy, good, and as many of them said, well treated. The bodies, all those who Hamas have it, they gave it, and they allowed international group to come to Gaza and to look for the rest of the bodies because they lost them. They died with their guards, and the places they have been to erased, bombed, and bulldozed by the Israeli army at the time of incursions. And that's why the Israel try to find excuses to violate ceasefire. So the ceasefire very fragile and uncertain. Gaza still uninhabitable place. People are going back, but they are finding once and again no homes, no residential areas, no hospitals, no streets, no water, no gas, nothing. And they are just trying to manage with the situation. The flow of humanitarian aid extremely slow, not as it has been agreed to. But even if it goes as they agreed to, this will not satisfy Gazans for the coming 6 months. Actually, still, there is very serious short of water, of food supplies, and all other medical needs.
So, from what I understand, is what you're saying is that you do not believe that this 20-point plan is enforceable in reality. And that brings me to the terms of this deal. The ceasefire text, it was brokered by Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, and the United States. But it makes no explicit reference to the occupation or to the Palestinian right of self determination. What does this kind of omission mean for the future of Palestine?
Never ever ceasefire was a target by itself. Ceasefire introduction to peace. And if it's serious introduction of peace, horizon should be put for the people. Hope should be given to the people. Real assurances of their life and dignity will be respected and preserved. But what's happening, it's vice versa. We have ceasefire, very, very fragile ceasefire, no horizon whatsoever for talking about self determination, independence, Palestinian state. No mentioning whatsoever to have an end for this criminal belligerent occupation. No word at all talking about respecting international law, international humanitarian law, and the human rights. No word about enabling Palestinian to live in certainty that peace will be there and their basic fundamental rights will be respected. If we want to have real peace and security, we have to respect rule of law and the human rights and international law.
And so, coming to international accountability itself, in South Africa's case accusing Israel of committing genocide in Gaza, the International Court of Justice had issued provisional measures in January 2024. Can you describe what this means for the people of Palestine, given the limitation to the court's ability to ensure compliance?
Before this genocidal war, Israel imposed 17 years of chronicle, inhuman blockade on the Gaza Strip. So the 2.5 million people were really suffering. And in this period of time, Israel was in control of movement of goods and individuals to Gaza. And that means they can decide what kind of macarona we have to have in Gaza. They can have this and have not that. They can decide what kind of food we should eat, this or that. They can decide what kind of medicine they can enter. Accordingly, this social, this blockade and the social economic suffocation it created in the occupied territories made Gaza sort of animal farm. International community just dumping to it some food and medicine. And we are lack of everything. We have in Gaza one of the highest percent of university graduates on earth. We have very skilled working class. We have very strong business community. But they shifted us to be a nation of beggars. They suffocate us socially and economically. Beyond that, uh, they made 65% of Gazans unpaid or unemployed, 90% under poverty line, and 85% depends on the rations distributed by UNRWA, World Food Program, UNICEF, and others. This is ugly. This is bad. This is man-made disaster. And hospitals were not supplied with the most of the equipments and medicine, and we are lack of it. Now, on the top of that, we have this genocidal war. And in this genocidal war, hospitals were one of the major targets from day one. And I can assure you, with no mercy, with no morality, with no standards whatsoever, even the most savage, dirty wars, never ever you target baby hospitals. And you take the incubators out and you take the babies out of them and you line them to die. And this was screened and showed to the whole world. I'm not talking about secret. Hospitals being bombed with phosphoric bombs, operation theaters, nurses, doctors, patients, and people sheltered
So
inside these hospitals.
if I may interrupt, so then the ICJ's provisional measures, have they brought any difference on ground? Because it is a massive, measure to impose. So has the ICJ's measures, like, what does it mean for the Palestinian people? Because it seems that there are limitations to the court's ability to ensure compliance with its measures.
We resorted to the most important courts on earth, whether the ICJ or the ICC, in order to have an end for at least two things. A, the entering of humanitarian aid. We were having at the time hundreds of thousands of injured people who need medications, equipments, medicine, and all needed, I mean, in a state of war as such. And we needed food to come in. But we were able to have three provisional measure decisions from the ICJ to allow immediate and free entry for the humanitarian aid and food, to stop this brutality, to stop this disastrous medical situation, and to allow people to have some food, I mean, to survive. But none of these three provision measures has been implemented, and it was like academic practice. It wasn't taken by the member states and be implemented on the ground, very unfortunately.
And so, coming to the negotiations, I mean, negotiations over hostage releases and reconstruction of Gaza are receiving priority over international investigations into violations of international law and even potential war crimes. In your view, how can the pursuit of diplomacy and the pursuit of justice proceed together without one undermining the other? Because right now it seems that Trump's 20-point plan has suddenly taken the center stage, whereas there is a lot of international investigation which is also going on simultaneously.
There is a clear cut consensus among Palestinian, Israeli, international leading human rights organizations. There is consensus among UN expert bodies and committees and rapporteurs. There is consensus uh, in the ICC and the ICJ about rule of law, which Israel never ever respected or were abide with, especially in this genocidal war. And that's why we were taken by surprise when Israel just ignored that and didn't respect any of these decisions. But international community should be the law enforcement agencies. Member states of the ICJ and the ICC should take the lead and responsibility and impose on Israel. I don't imagine the criminal will be willingly abide with enforcing the law. That's why we have law enforcement agency. In this situation, I think and believe international community should act promptly, swiftly, but we are totally disappointed. US and Europe, especially US and Europe, instead of doing that, they are still saying Israel do have the right of self-defense, and they still supporting Israel with arms and bombs where our children, women, hospitals, and civilians are bombed and killed with.
And so, you have warned in the past that Gaza could become the graveyard of international law. What are the indicators you're looking at to see if international law is recovering its authority or weakening further in this case, after the ceasefire, especially?
We didn't invent the wheel. We didn't invent international law. International law, la creme de la creme of the human experience. And this came especially enhanced, strengthened, and have real teeth after the Second World War. That's why we have had, after that, Geneva Conventions to protect civilians at the time of war. That's why we have Universal Declaration for Human Rights. That's why we have Nuremberg trials and accountability for suspected Nazi criminals. And that's why we have the Convention of Prevention and Punishment of Genocide crime. Now, having said that, we are entitled for dignity and justice as part of the world community, and we are people under occupation. Israel do the occupation for the last 58 years, and we have it on our skin. We have the most well-documented conflict. We resorted to international legal system, whether the ICC or the ICJ. ICJ ruled about the illegality of occupation and it should end. We still having it. We have decisions against two suspected war criminals, Netanyahu and Gallant, the ex-minister of defense. None of it has been implemented. I think if you have more than 70,000 killed in 2 years, and you have around 300,000 injured, most of them with amputation in 2 years, if you have 90% of Gaza erased, if people are suffering, famine, and if West Bank subject to real ethnic cleansing in Jerusalem and the rest of it, and if you have a new brand of apartheid there, and this is the most well-documented conflict, you gave it to both courts, and both courts decided partially about it, and none of its decision has been implemented. And the genocide continuing, it's like a call for people, you are naive. Stop it. Don't think there is any rule of law or justice in this world. It's only the powerful people. We live in the rule of jungle world. They want to destroy hope, and they want to destroy any possibility of people to dream of justice and dignity. And that's why when we are defending Gaza, when we are defending Palestine, we are defending the civilians, when we defending international law and international law, when we are defending justice and dignity for Palestinians, we are in the forefront of humanity defending justice and dignity for human beings. Because if this is happening in Gaza, then it's the end. And I don't think we should give up and allow them to make Gaza the graveyard of international law.
So, coming more to the killing of journalists, according to press freedom organizations, hundreds of journalists and media workers have been killed by Israeli attacks. There are other reports of Israeli backed mercenary gangs targeting journalists despite the ceasefire. In this environment, where independent verification and journalistic protection appear to have collapsed, what does this mean for the right to truth? And how can protection of journalists be meaningfully upheld under international law?
Shireen Abu Akleh was covering what's going on in Jenin. She was shot and killed deliberately, intentionally, and this was shown and proven. No suspect about that. But Shireen Abu Akleh wasn't the first and wasn't the last. Before Shireen Abu Akleh, there is a journalist in the Gaza Strip. He is a British and he was shot by a sniper and killed. And the Israeli said, we thought the camera he holds was RBJ, which is nonsense, meaningless. In the West Bank, also an Italian journalist in the first Intifada was killed under the same claim. I can tell you about journalists, Palestinian ones, who were killed either at their offices by bombing by aeroplanes. Their offices were deliberately targeted and they were killed in 2008, 2012, 2014, or during the March of Return when snipers killed deliberately journalists. But in this war, Israelis went too far. They killed more than 280 journalists by now. And this happened at the daylight. Israel don't deny that. They are proud of saying, we targeted this, we targeted that. Even military correspondents for armies, they should be protected, and they are entitled for protection. Our journalists, first-class journalists, they showed professionalism, independent. They covered many wars, and that hurt Israel because they were able to broadcast, especially this genocide, at the daylight, at the real time, and the whole world show it. This is the first genocide war happens, and because of our heroic work of our journalists, their nobility, their commitment, their professionalism of exposing reality to the world, they paid, and they paid heavily. Israel want to monopolize the story. They want to monopolize the reporting. That's why not only Palestinians were killed, but any international journalists were denied entry for at least the last 2 years.
And so, when it comes to the global south and India, especially, countries such as India, they've concentrated their stance on diplomacy and humanitarian relief for Gaza, but they have avoided challenging Israel's authority. What constructive role could the global south play in strengthening the international legal response to what is happening in Gaza?
India do have fantastic history with Palestine and Palestinian people since day one of this conflict. And they showed commitment, support for our right of return, our right of Palestinian state of self-determination and independence. The last 10 years or so, there is a drastic change. The time of Nehru, Gandhi changed, and we have different leadership who has full space cooperation, who has full army industry cooperation, who export the raw material of ammunitions to Israel, cooperation in the IT, where all these things used for one specific purpose by Israel against the Palestinian people. We respect the Indian government. We have fantastic good relation with the Indian people. I think one of the most watched films in Palestine, the Indian films, I think historically, if you ask people, my generation, we look a source of inspiration for Nehru, Gandhi. We adore them, we love them, we respect them as world leaders. And now we are seeing India have full trade relation, full cooperation with Israel. Are they rewarding them? Are the world so small? What India has to do with a state like Israel? Where is India's values? Where is India's standards, commitment for international law, international humanitarian law, and the human rights? Where is India position with the victimizer, with those who are doing apartheid, with those who are doing genocide, with those who are proud of all their bloody and present history in victimizing civilians? I think Palestinians in the right side of history have just for right cause. They suffer the injustice and they in need of free committed people, free committed countries, which India belongs to. We need you, and we don't expect more than that. South should look to South Africa. Why India should be less? Look to Brazil. Why India should be less? Even New Zealand showed commitment and courage. Australia. Where is India? The mighty India, the India of pride of history. It has its share to contribute to right causes and to justice.
And so that brings me to my final question. You've spent decades documenting violations and arguing that law must outlast violence. Given that violence continues unabated and international law is in crisis, how does one find resolve when it comes to the Palestinian cause?
We have to choose either or, in simple words, rule of law or rule of jungle. And in this conflict, too much blood has been shed. Too much pain and suffering has been shed. We are the last wall. If we are broken, then rule of jungle and the conflict will be endless. Palestinian-Israeli conflict, it's not Palestinian-Israeli conflict. It's a test for rule of law. I believed in this as romantic revolutionaries who believe that man with big M deserve justice and dignity. I know it's not easy. I know it's very hard. And I know all what's happening, even the last designation for us and sanctioned by the Treasury in the US to the three organizations, or before the designations of judges and prosecutors in the ICC. The reason for it, killing everybody. You shouldn't keep dreaming of this. You should stop dreaming of justice and dignity. No way for that. If they took this from our heart, from our mind, then it's open-ended invitation for violence, for blood, for more killing, for more destruction, for more famine. We cannot give up. This is not a choice. It's a must. And that's why we need all good wills, all good people across the globe, from India to Ouagadougou, from Tokyo to New York, Stockholm to South Africa. We need all the goodwill of the people. And look, for the whole world people, what they are saying. Palestine free, freedom for Palestinians. Why the world leaders? Why the world states? Who can make the difference to that? We believe in this, and many across the globe do believe in that. We are sure together one day we will able to deliver our message, and this will be implemented and become reality. We know we are not alone. All free committed people across the globe do support that, and states sooner, better than later, this will be implemented, inshallah.
I really appreciate you joining us, Raji Sourani. Thank you so much for taking out the time. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.